So welcome one and all. We are gathering around the transforming presence of Christ, and we're going to hear quite a lot about him from Luke's Gospel this morning. And here is Joe to say what Value Builders have been up to.
Okay, so before Nick begins to go through this story of Zacchaeus and find out what we can learn from how Zacchaeus met Jesus, children, you should have been delivered or posted some packs. And in your packs, you should have 2 pieces at least of green cards. Some of you have got more than that because I've started to do some cutting for you. Your first task is to be listening to what Nick is talking about, but also cutting out the 19 hearts that are on your card. It's quite a lot of cutting out. Don't panic. You've got plenty of time, but just get started on that. Adults that are not very good at sitting still and quietly through an entire service on Zoom, what you need if you want to do this yourself is a piece of paper, and it doesn't have to be green, piece of paper, and you want 19 hearts. All right. So any adult that finds that they either fall asleep or get itchy, 19 hearts cut out, drawn and cut out off a piece of paper. Okay, I've got about 12 on one sheet and about 7 on another. Okay, kids, you need to find some scissors and get cutting and do some listening. Nick?
Thank you very much indeed. Before we read this passage, there's 2 things I'd like you to think about. What some of us, when we hear this story, immediately identify with Zacchaeus. Incidentally, Ruth, I'm not sure whether the subtitles have been turned on because they haven't been coming up on my screen, but that's okay. Apart from not thinking about subtitles, is when people listen to the story about Zacchaeus, some people identify with Zacchaeus in the story, somebody who is unloved by other people. Some of it for just circumstance that he may have been short, and also some of Zacchaeus's own doing. And there may be some people listening to this who feel that other people don't love them, and quite frankly, they sort of agree that other people shouldn't love them because they see inside themselves something that's not very lovable. Okay, in which case, as we go through this story, please focus on how Zacchaeus dealt with being that sort of person. Because by the end of the story, maybe there's a way out for you. You may also know somebody who feels like that about themselves, who feels that they are unloved, and they think there's good reason that nobody loves them. And you can be praying for that person that they might go through the process that Zach went through. However, and it's possible that this lot is going to be the majority, and Linda needs to welcome some people into the church building just behind us. Linda, just behind you, thank you. So the other people may see that there's somebody else that they know who nobody really likes, and there's a very good reason why nobody likes them, and that quite frankly, depending on the sort of person they are, I find it very difficult to love them because they continually do things that I completely disapprove of and that God disapproves of. There are Zacchaeuses out there who steal from the most vulnerable in society, and that, quite frankly, I don't believe that I should love them either. If you feel like that towards somebody, I'd like you to be specific. Who is it that you find most difficult to love because of the sort of person they are, because of the choices they make? I'd like you to think about that person and see how Jesus reacts to them. Okay, so here's the story. Jesus was going through the city of Jericho. Jericho, quite a prosperous place at the time. And therefore, there's quite a lot of money in Jericho, which means if you're a tax collector, Jericho was a prime place to be a tax collector. Because if you're going to siphon off, 10% of everybody's income, you want to be in a place where people's incomes are high. There's a mathematician nodding at me in the church building. Okay, whereas if you're amongst poor people, your scope for ripping people off is less. Okay, so if it was a prime position to be tax collector if you wanted to make loads of money. So he was a chief tax collector, was this Zacchaeus. And as a result, because Jericho was a prosperous place, he was a tax collector, and the deal was in those days that you could take extra money off people, and the Romans, the authorities, wouldn't question you. Okay. And this is extraordinary. He was seeking to see Jesus. Who is he, this man? That's a literal translation of the Greek. Jesus, who is he? I think that's a very modern English idiom. I think it translates very well. This guy who just healed a Roman centurion servant. Who is that sort of person? Who would do a thing like that? There's a whole load of nice people that you want to help. Isn't it extraordinary that Zacchaeus wanted to meet Jesus, who's a really, really good person? Surely Zacchaeus would be deeply uncomfortable. So if you're one of those yellow people that's thinking about somebody who is unlovely, in this story, the person that's the real rotter has got something inside them that is reaching out for something better. Let's thank God that even nasty people have this desire sometimes to reach out to God. Isn't that brilliant? And incidentally, if you feel like a Zacchaeus, and you know that you're a not very nice person in so many ways, and that you don't deserve other people's love, do you see within yourself a desire for something better? Because that's a really, really good starting point. Okay, so there's 4 things that I think that we learn from this. Jesus goes out of his way to meet rotten people. He goes off to Jericho. And if we're followers of Jesus, then we go out of our way to meet the people to this rich place where there's rich people ripping off rich people. Jesus chooses to go there because he wants to meet the people that want something better. Just as an aside, Zacchaeus became the person he was because he was okay with exploiting other people. And just look at yourself. look at myself. And I'm afraid when we go to a supermarket and when we buy things over the internet, that is a very real issue. If there are companies around that exploit their workers and we give them our business, we are part of the problem that is exploiting other people. And I, for one, am guilty of exploiting others in that means. And it's not good. And maybe that's something we want to think and pray about. Also, beware of looking after yourself. It's good to look after yourself. Zacchaeus needed money to pay the bills, but he just went too far. His looking after himself ended up by exploiting others. So those were two things, but the third one is, if you've got a problem in your life, seeing Jesus, seeking him out is a really, really cool thing. I hope your children, your cutting out is going well. We're going to, Joe's just going to say something and then we'll sing.
Okay, so I hope that you've now got quite a lot of your cutting out done. Don't panic if it's not all done. What then happens is you are going to take any heart, and it doesn't matter which one. Don't worry about these words. You've got single words on the back. It really doesn't matter. You take any heart, and on each heart, you write the 4 things that Nick's talked about so far. Anyone that's too little to write, you can get a parent to do it for you. So on the blank side of the heart, I have written, go out of your way to meet people. What I've then done is I've taken one of the stickers and cut a little piece of ribbon from your ribbon. And on the side that's got the printed word, I've made a loop and stuck it with the sticker. And I'm going to do that 4 times. 1 for go out of your way to meet people. 1 for beware of exploiting others. Here's beware of looking after yourself. So I'm going to cut my little piece of ribbon. I'm going to fold it over and I'm going to stick it on the side that's got the printed word, and it doesn't matter which heart you use. You can use any heart you like. Each heart is going to have 1 of these numbered phrases on it. So then I stick my sticker on that one, and that's the next one done. So while we sing, can you try and get the first 4 hearts done? Go out of your way to meet people. Beware of exploiting others. Beware of looking after yourself. And seek to see Jesus. Nick.
So what's going to happen, I'm going to read the next bit of the story, and during this, you need to finish your cutting out, and as I come up with the next 3 things, children, you're going to be writing them on the next 3 hearts. So if you remember back to the story, we've got Zacchaeus, who is looking to see Jesus. But it goes on and says that, now this is a literal translation. I've given them, Joe, their instructions, so I'm just getting on with the story. This is a literal translation. He wasn't able to because he was small in stature. I'd like to point out that there are 2 possibilities at this point. If Zacchaeus was small and there was a large crowd, he wouldn't be able to see Jesus. Because if you've been small at the back of a whole load of grown-ups, you won't be able to see what's at the front because you're small and the grown-ups are getting in the way. I'd also like to say that it's possible that it's Jesus who was small and Zacchaeus was normal height. Because if you've ever had the experience of being normal height in a crowd, whether you're the same height as everybody else, and the person at the front of the crowd that you're trying to see is short, you can't see them either. Okay? And I know most Christians go for the fact that it must be Zacchaeus who's the short one. But particularly for those of you that are short in stature, Jesus might have been short in stature too. He might have been a bit of a short guy. Anyway, that's just a possibility. Anyway, Zacchaeus, who might either short or tall, then runs to the front of the crowd, but knows that, of course, crowds move, and therefore just being at the front at the moment, he might not stay there. He then climbs up the sycamore tree so that wherever Jesus is in the crowd, he can look down and he can see Jesus. And that works whether Jesus is small or whether he's normal height, is that he will be able to see Jesus. The other beautiful thing, and again, this is a literal translation, so it's not very good literature, but it's brilliant, that it says he goes up the sycamore tree so that he could see him. Okay, do you see? I think this is deliberate. I think this is deliberately ambiguous as to who the he is and who the him is. Now, in one sense, it does say that Zacchaeus was seeking to see Jesus. So on this one, the dominant thing that's going on here is that he, Zacchaeus, could see him, Jesus. I think the reason why it's written like this is because Jesus wants relationships, and the nature of relationships is that if I see you, you can see me. And that if you want to see Jesus, by definition, you are going to also be seen by Jesus, because if the line of sight is good for me to see you, it is a scientific fact that the line of sight is good for you to see me. And it's not like Zoom. Well, no, it is like Zoom because at the moment Joe can see me and I can see Joe. Okay, the Zoom is working. That's assuming we've both got our cameras on. But a real relationship, and this is why we hanker for lockdown to finish, is we want real relationships where we can see and we can be seen. And Jesus wants us to have good, real relationships. And that is one heck of a risk, because I might see somebody who's really nice, but they will see me for who I am, and that's a huge risk, that they might see my inadequacies. And being a follower of Jesus gives us the freedom not to be afraid of that. Anyway, what are my next three things? If you've got a problem, tackle it. Okay, don't just whinge in, I can't see Jesus because either he or I is small. Okay, just, if there's a problem, focus on the problem and tackle it. Now, there are some problems that you try and tackle, and cancer may be one of them. That actually, there are some things that you can't eventually do something about. But there are so many problems that you can do something to tackle the problem. And that includes cancer, because there are treatments that you can get. And also there's something about living life in all its fullness with those limitations, that you can do something. You face the problem and you tackle it. I think it's really important. It's really important for grown-ups, and it's really important for children. If there's something you say, it's not fair because life's not the same with my friend. Okay, if there's something, tackle the problem. Next one. Earlier in verse 3, Zacchaeus was seeking to see Jesus. He had this, I'd really like to see Jesus. I'd just like to say that as a starting point, really important. If each of us says, I'd really like to be a better Christian, I'd really like to meet with Jesus, I'd really like to do that, that's good, that's a good starting point. But it's not the thought that completely counts. You need to put action in, okay? You need to make an effort to change to be the most wonderful person of you that there is. Just thinking, oh, I'd like to be a better person isn't enough. You need to go out of your way to make an effort to see Jesus. So that's number 6, make an effort to see Jesus. And finally, this is brilliant. We want to see Jesus and be seen by him and have a relationship with the living God, which is absolutely marvelous. So those are the next 3 things for children to put onto their leaves. What we're going to do is we're then going to pray. Joe, can you just say what, during this song and during our prayers, what you'd like people to be doing?
Yes, so you're doing hearts number 5, 6 and 7. It doesn't matter which heart you pick up, just carry on writing on your heart, tackle the problem. Next one, make an effort to see Jesus. Next one, see and be seen by Jesus. Carry on making your loops and carry on sticking on your stickers so that you're building up a pile now of 7 hearts. If you haven't finished your cutting out, you can keep going on your cutting out as well.
Okay, this thing about, it's not just about Zacchaeus wanting to see Jesus, it's Jesus wanting to see Zacchaeus. And here's the proof of it, because in verse 5, as Jesus came to the place and he having looked up, Jesus looks up to us. Jesus looks up to the no good, hopeless people that have had to climb the tree. What an extraordinary act of grace that is. To be on the receiving end of it, that Jesus looks up at us. And secondly, that Jesus is doing this amazing act of grace to other people, which is extraordinary. In order to do this, Jesus has to be in the right place at the right time. His initially, in point number 1, was Jesus goes out of his way to meet people. Well, having gone out of his way to meet people, he's at the right time when Zacchaeus is up the tree waiting to see them. If we want to be like Jesus to Zacchaeus is in our life, we need to be thinking about them, praying about them in such a way that we notice when they're up the tree, waiting to see us and to see something better. It's got to be on our agenda. And we need to, the 9th point that's coming up on the screen is that Jesus looks up to people. If you're like me and there's a tendency to look down on people that aren't very impressive human beings, Jesus is, we want to be our role model for being the sort of person that looks up to other people. And let's give thanks that Jesus does that to us. Jesus is extraordinary. He says, I must stay in your house. An amazing turn of phrase that. I'm compelled to. Mainly because he knows that for salvation to come to this guy, the only place is going to be in his house. And I'm really sorry that we're in lockdown as I do this, because we're not allowed to do this. But as we look for how we're going to behave as lockdown is removed, we need to get close to people and to remain, to spend time in where they live. Staying, remaining is so important. Zacchaeus then receives him into his house rejoicing. We need to be the sort of people that can accept hospitality. That's actually that's a Jesus thing. Point number 10 is that this thing of saying, I must stay in your house, we should be the people that are good at receiving hospitality, of going to somebody else's place and allowing them to entertain us and to be host. That's a mark of grace. We tend to think of giving hospitality as a mark of grace, but receiving hospitality and allowing people to come to us is really important. And if we're going to have salvation, if we're going to meet with Jesus, there are moments where we need to get on with it. There are moments where if we work out that there's a meeting point, either that we're the Jesus figures and we can go and meet Zacchaeus, or that we're the Zacchaeus person that we're going to go and meet Jesus. We need to get on with it and do it now, not wait until we'll put that off. We'll just take a rain check on that and we'll be in contact. And no, there's a time for doing it now. We need to hurry and do things. And coupled with that, when Jesus says, I must stay in your house, and you need to come down in a hurry, it's marvelous that in verse 5, Zacchaeus, having been told to come down in a hurry, Zacchaeus in verse 6 does come down in a hurry, and he does exactly what Jesus tells him to do. So that's a marvelous thing to do, number 12, to do what Jesus says. And just as Jesus is wanting to stay in somebody's house, Zacchaeus joyfully gives hospitality to Jesus. These are just amazing things. The reason why we're having so many of these things is that the leaves that the children are doing, there's 19 of them for the key verse in this later on. So we're doing 19 things that we could learn. I suggest that you probably focus on one or two of them, but keep writing, children. That was 8 cool. to 13. And now we've just got the final 5 to do. Okay, because the first thing is that what the bystanders are doing, I did 2 bewares early on, 2 and 3, beware of exploiting others, beware of looking after yourself. But a whole load of people were then grumbling. Everyone was grumbling. There's a sort of everybody just becoming like sheep and saying, oh, isn't it dreadful? Isn't it dreadful? Isn't it dreadful? So I'd beware of grumbling as well. And the grumbling is based on, he's gone to stay in with a sinful man. I think that at the heart of this is that when God shows grace to other people, sometimes we feel really hurt that we don't feel that he's showing it to us. And we can become really bitter and twisted. That because we failed to find joy in the fact that Zacchaeus is finding grace. I think this particularly happens when we're tired, and that when we feel at our wits' end, that other people receiving kindness and not us is just really difficult. And that we hold it against Zacchaeus and we hold it against Jesus. And I understand it, but it just makes us into not very nice human beings to allow that to fester in us. So let's beware of jealousy. I think that they were, unlike Jesus early in the story, they were continuing to look down at Zacchaeus, because they said, he's gone in to stay with a sinful man. All they could see in Zacchaeus was the fact that he was a rotter, and he was a rotter. You know, people say, oh, I'm only saying what's true. Yeah. Actually, if you confine yourself to saying what's true, you can still be a really nasty human being. What makes us glorious human beings is in the selection of the truth that we choose to speak about. Yes, he was a sinful man, but he was also somebody who was seeking after God. And just the fact that something's true about somebody else doesn't give us the right to look down on them. We want to see something that Jesus saw in that other person. Okay, anyway, Zacchaeus has been on the receiving end of Jesus saying, I must come to your house, of Jesus looking up to him. What does then Zacchaeus do? I think it's really interesting that he wants to make the rest of his life better. And I think there are times where this happens to us, where we say, yeah, I'm going to be a better person. And we say, yeah, I'm always going to do the washing up, or I'm not going to look down my nose at other people. I think there's something really helpful here. Zacchaeus stood up and made a promise, not to other people. He made a promise to God who knows him. So I think what I learned from this passage this week is that if I want to turn my life around and I've encountered Jesus and I want to do something good, if I'm going to make a promise, I'm going to make it to God, not to other people, although there comes a moment where I'm going to say it to other people too. But I say it primarily to the Lord. I do it in other people may be listening, so they can hold me to it. But fundamentally, this is about me being honest before God. I think that's a really cool idea. And if you want to make your life better, if you want to respond to Jesus, giving people to those in need is a really good starting point. I give half my possessions to the poor. So number 17 is give to those who are in need. And the other thing is to make things right. If I've cheated anybody of anything, I'm going to restore it fourfold. There are things that you may have harmed people in the past. Where it is possible to do so, you need to make it right. Give it back and some. So restore it fourfold. This last one is a more thoughtful idea that I have, is that if you make a public direction, I know I've said that you primarily make this promise to the Lord, but if you make the promise to the Lord in the hearing of other people, and also you make it your policy from now on that if I defraud anybody, I'm going to give fourfold back. Next time you think of stealing from somebody, you've just made it really difficult for yourself to be one of the bad guys in the future. And I think there's a principle here. I know people that I've got a problem with watching inappropriate television. I know, and this was before the internet, where they just asked for a hotel room without a television because they knew they were susceptible to watching inappropriate television. Word beginning with P. It's a family service, so I'm not going to dwell on it. But they actually asked for a hotel room without the TV in it. Make it difficult for yourself to do wrong in the future. Make sure that if alcohol's the problem, that there's no alcohol in the house. Just make it difficult for yourself because you know what your weakness is. Anyway, I thought that was. I thought that was what he was doing there. Anyway, that's 19 things to do. In which case, Joe.
Okay, now this is the really challenging bit, which is going to stretch the parents. The teenagers will be cool, but what you need to do is you need to turn your hearts over so that they're on the side where it's just the printed word. So you've got one printed word on each heart. Now, those printed words make up our final sentence of what Jesus says at the end of the story of Zacchaeus, which we haven't seen yet. It was in the video, but you haven't seen it on the screen. It is quite difficult because there are 19 words and they are all jumbled up, but they are what Jesus said to Zacchaeus at the end of today's story. I have been kind and given you a capital letter at the beginning of sentences and a full stop at the end of sentences. So that might be a help. But what you're going to do while the adults are continuing to focus on the story is to see if you can work out what the key sentence that Jesus says at the end of this story is.
Here we go. Because what the children are working out is the words in yellow. Jesus said to Zacchaeus, salvation has come to this house today. Salvation, being saved from who you are, your weaknesses, being saved from what other people are doing you down in their attitudes. That's arrived partly because Jesus has come into the house, but partly because you were seeking Jesus. Partly because, just looking at the white bits on the bottom of the screen, because you were seeking something. You were wanting to tackle the problem. You made an effort to see Jesus. You wanted to see him. Once you got an inkling that Jesus wanted to come to your house, you did what was right now. You came down the tree and you did it in a hurry. That you gave hospitality. You allowed Jesus to come into your house. That you made promises, that gave to those who are in need, and that you put things right, and you did so in a way that would make it difficult to do wrong. All of those are wrapped up into what salvation is. And it's come to where you live. I wonder whether it's brilliant this time. Those of you that were on Zoom, you're listening to Zoom in your house. In the house where sometimes in a moment you're going to have a right go at the kids or right go at somebody else it's in your house that you are encountering Jesus. It's not something that you go out of the building primarily to do and then go back to normal life. Salvation happens in our bed, in our living room, where we remain, where we stay. Why does it come? Because we found out he is also in Abraham's family, that we are also children of God, that's what Zacchaeus has found. And if we're thinking about this for somebody else, this person too has realized that they are a child of Abraham. And then this is Jesus speaking. He says, the Son of Man came to go out of his way to find lost people. People who've just lost their way, who've looked after themselves rather too much, have ended up by exploiting other people. I wonder whether the salvation may have come to people who've repented of looking down at other people, who've stopped being jealous. Maybe Zacchaeus wasn't the only one that got salvation this day. Maybe there were some bystanders that stopped whinging, that stopped being jealous, that worked out that the love of God extended to even the tax collectors, and that they were liberated by that too. So Zacchaeus wasn't the only lost person here. The grumblers were lost as well. The Son of Man came to find lost people and to save them. Right. So I'm just doing the, here's a blessing. May you know the blessing of seeing and being seen by Jesus. May you know the blessing of accepting and receiving hospitality and kindness. And may you know the blessing of promising before God to do good and make it difficult for yourself to do wrong. May you do this today and every day forever. Amen. Amen.